I had been Lieutenant Weston's guest at a testimonial dinner for a retiring police officer. And while the lieutenant was driving me home, he received the report of another attack by a man the newspapers called the Compulsion killer. We were at the scene of the crime in a few minutes. The victim was identified as Mrs. Lewis Hastings, wife of the geology professor at the university. She was apparently recovering from shock, but wasn't badly hurt. The witness, the girl whose scream probably saved Mrs. Hastings' life, was telling her story.
Miss, I'm Lieutenant Weston.
Oh, hello, I'm Marzel Hendricks.
How do you do? I'd like to ask you a few questions. What are you doing here?
Well, here at the students' boarding house, we take turns putting out the trash.
And tonight it was your turn?
Yes, and as I was walking out to the street, I noticed Mrs. Hastings walking along alone.
Did you know it was Mrs. Hastings?
Oh, yes, everyone knows Mrs. Hastings.
Then what happened?
Well, then this man sprang out from behind the building. He was wearing a white handkerchief around his face. And then he dangled this rope in front of her eyes for a minute. It was like a hideous warning that she had only a few seconds left to live. And then he threw the rope around her neck, and I screamed. And then the man dropped the rope and ran away.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. Mrs. Hastings, do you feel like talking?
Yes, of course, I'm all right now.
Did you notice anything about this man that you might be able to recognize if you saw him again?
No, I'm sorry, I don't think so.
What about you?
Well, we didn't see anything, but we heard Marzel scream and came as fast as we could.
May I have your name?
Todd Leslie.
Am I right in assuming that you two were together?
Right. That's right. I'm Cam Halsey.
How do you do? Where were you two when you heard Miss Hendricks scream?
Oh, on the edge of campus, heading toward Faculty Row. That's this street.
What was going on when you got here?
Well, by the time we got here, Marzel had already carried Mrs. Hastings into the house. She was lying there unconscious, and Marzel was trying to revive her.
Then I called the police, and Todd went outside and waited for you.
Thank you, boys. Miss Hendricks, you said everybody knew Mrs. Hastings. Now, is that because she's a professor's wife, or is there another reason?
Well, Mrs. Hastings is very active here. She's taking a postgraduate course in criminology, and she often lectures the students on crime and criminals.
What happened to the rope the man used?
Oh, I have it. Excuse me. This is it, and this is the handkerchief.
Handkerchief?
Yes, it was lying on the ground near Mrs. Hastings.
Thank you. Mrs. Hastings, do you recognize this handkerchief?
Why, yes, of course. It's one of a box I gave my husband for Christmas. See? Louis Hastings. How'd it get here?
It was worn by the man who attacked you.
My husband?
All right. I admit I am the man that attacked Nancy.
Louis.
Well, I realize it was a silly thing to do, Nancy. I'm sorry. But I was just trying to teach her a lesson.
Teach her a lesson?
Well, yes. You see, she believes that these mad killers are just sick men, not criminals. She thinks they should be given a seat in a classroom or a bed in a hospital, not put in an asylum or a prison or executed, no matter how many people they may have ruthlessly and brutally murdered.
Is this true?
Some of it. My husband's a materialist. He refuses to recognize the fact that these poor creatures don't kill because they're criminals, but because they're emotionally disturbed.
She wouldn't let me escort her home tonight. She said that if she ran into this killer, she'd just invite him here for dinner. Well, all I wanted to do was to show her that she's not a superwoman.
If you admit imitating the compulsion killer tonight, how do we know you haven't imitated him on other occasions? Let's say 4 other occasions.
Well, that's ridiculous.
Well, how do we know you wouldn't have killed Mrs. Hastings if you hadn't been interrupted?
Now, just a minute. We may disagree on social problems, but we're not about to kill each other.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Hastings, but a compulsion killer kills without reason. And this situation certainly warrants further questioning. I'm holding you on suspicion of assault with a deadly weapon and complicity in 4 murders.
Come in. Good morning, Counselor.
John?
Sit down. What can I do for you this morning?
Thank you. I suppose you know I believe the professor was telling the truth last night.
Herb, I have great respect for your judgment.
But
there are times when I have a certain respect for my own.
well, that's natural. I even remember the time you were right. Seriously, though, John, I don't believe that there's any connection between the compulsion killer and Professor Hastings. He'd have no reason.
No reason. That's it exactly, Herb. Why do you suppose they call him the compulsion killer? Because there seems to be no reason for his crimes.
I know. I've done some investigating. There are 3 young women, all university students, very attractive at that, who were killed on or in the neighborhood of the university campus.
And one equally attractive woman was killed at the Whitewater Resort, where the university has several summer courses in various subjects.
I know that, too.
But Professor Hastings has never been able to prove, not even in one instance, that he was somewhere else when the crimes were committed.
Hastings teaches geology. He isn't used to furnishing alibis.
But he was also lecturing at Whitewater when a young woman was killed there.
Whitewater was full of university students at the time.
But Herb, we never found one of them wearing a white handkerchief and trying to strangle someone.
John, in every other attack, the killer waited for the victim to pass him, then threw a noose around his neck from behind.
That's right.
Last night, Professor Hastings jumped from behind a building and faced his wife.
Is that your argument?
Yes.
Well, you know, it's a very good one. But I don't think it's going to impress the district attorney.
Well, it impresses me, along with a lot of other things. I'd like to talk to Mrs. Hastings, if you don't mind. I think I've got a theory that might uncover the real compulsion killer. Lieutenant,
Yeah.
from what I've seen so far, I doubt that Professor Hastings ever had a compulsion.
Oh, Herb. I wish I could say the same for you.
Hey, Cam, wait! Well?
Everything's set. Todd will be here any minute.
Is Mrs. Hastings home?
Yeah, she's waiting there for us.
Cam, why do we have to tell her?
Because she's as much involved in this thing as we are. And besides, we need her support if we expect any police cooperation.
We don't need police cooperation, Cam. That's the whole trouble. Look, we've got a sensational plan and a terrific chance of making it work. Now, if the police get involved, they're going to ruin everything. They're going to do everything their way, and then nobody will even know it was our idea.
What is it with you women anyway? I mean, it's no wonder you get strangled.
Well, what I can't understand is why more men aren't strangled.
Hi. Hi, Todd. Why the daggers?
Oh, nothing at all. We've got another fearless crime expert on our hands. Marzell here doesn't want us to tell the police about our plan.
Well, I'll have to admit, I agree with her.
You what?
Cam, if you were a cop, would you like a bunch of students telling you how to enforce the law in your precinct? I don't think we're going to get this production past the talking stage.
Look, Todd, I mean, still worth a try anyway, right? Come on, let's go.
I've done a lot of thinking since last night, Mr. Maris. I realize I've been a foolish and headstrong woman.
Don't be too severe on yourself, Mrs. Hastings.
Louis proved his point. In that fraction of a second before I lost consciousness, I could see myself as victim number 5 lying on a slab in the morgue. I was in no mood to defend the psycho killer then. All I wanted to do was to run to get that rope from around my throat. Louis proved his point all right, but at a frightful cost to his prestige and position. The Board of Regents will probably dismiss him for this. It's all my fault.
Mrs. Hastings, that is hardly the problem.
Well, surely they can't connect Louis in any way with the other 4 murders.
People have been convicted and even executed on less evidence than the police have against your husband.
What am I going to do?
If you'll cooperate, I think we can prove Louis innocent the easy way.
I'll do anything. Anything at all. Excuse me. Come on in.
Thank
You know Mr. Maris, don't you?
Yes, good morning.
Please sit down.
Thank you.
Now tell me, what's all this about?
Well, Mrs. Hastings, we don't think your husband's even remotely connected with the compulsion killer.
Even though he's under arrest, and the police seem to think that he's the man they're looking for.
Mr. Maris, we think the killer's still loose and right here on the campus.
And most of the student body feels the same way about it.
The area is undergoing a siege of fear, and the effect on the morale of the students is beginning to show in their work.
When you asked if you could come and talk with me, you intimated you had a plan. Do you?
Yes. We're going to organize a campus patrol, and with police cooperation, they'll give it to us, and without the cooperation, they don't.
We're picking men we're sure of, and we'll spot them around the campus every night.
And if the psycho shows up again, we'll tag him.
Right.
What do you think, Mr. Maris?
Well, I'll talk to Lieutenant Weston. He's a reasonable and capable police officer, and he wants that killer just as much as you do. It might work. Now, what can you lose? You can't let a bunch of inexperienced university students go on a killer hunt without some supervision.
My position is that we have the suspect in custody.
Now, suppose you're in the wrong position.
Well, that'll be Professor Hastings for further interrogation, so if you'll excuse me.
Mind if I sit in? I expect to defend him.
You know, Herb, there are times when I wish you were in the furniture business. Come in. Thanks, Joe.
I'll give you 10 minutes with your client.
Now, what I have to ask him, I'm going to ask him in private.
What have you two been arguing about, whether I'm guilty or not?
Just a moment, Hastings.
I don't see why you settle for me in a cell when the actual murderer, a man who snuffed out 4 lives, is still roaming that campus.
Professor Hastings, I talked to your wife last night.
Never mind about my wife, and never mind about me. It's those kids on campus I'm worried about.
Weston. Yeah. I'll be right there.
What's the matter?
Another attack on the campus. A young man has been stabbed, wounded very seriously.
The attack proved to be a case of campus nerves, and the injury not as bad as reported. The big girl, Marzale Hendricks, explained it to me. Marzale seemed to have the faculty, happy or otherwise, of being on the ground every time there was trouble.
The jittery feelings on this campus and the fear that's got everybody just about out of their mind. This idiot, Taffy Chilton, starts jumping out at the girls just for the fun of seeing them run and scream.
And he jumped at the wrong girl.
He sure did. This young lady had a pair of scissors, and before she realized it was Taffy, she let him have it.
How is Taffy?
After what he pulled, Herb, I'd say he was a lucky guy. He'll live. Well, that's all we can do here. No arrest, no charges.
Well, I'll be getting along.
Thank you, Miss Hendricks.
You're welcome.
You know, if the students really believed that you had the compulsion killer under arrest, that girl wouldn't have been carrying the scissors.
Counselor, emotional young women are liable to do anything.
But they're not in the habit of going around stabbing people.
You have a suggestion?
Yes, the idea I gave you in the office. Remember, they laughed at Robert Fulton?
Robert Fulton. Okay, Herb, you sold me. What's your idea?
Well, first, I'd like to talk to Mrs. Hastings. She's the alpha and omega of this situation.
The beginning and the end.
The beginning and the end. Mrs. Hastings, most of the students and others at the university are very well aware of your views concerning crime and mental illness.
Yes, I imagine they are.
But no one outside of this room, including Professor Hastings, knows that you've changed your opinion on how to handle these people.
That's right.
Well, this is the basis of our plan. The main characteristic of the mentally unstable is egoism, excessive self-love. This is usually the basic fixation of the psychoneurotic and usually leads to his or her downfall, an inability to cope with criticism or disparagement. Mm-hmm. Now, I want you to write an article for tomorrow's edition of the university paper. I'll help you frame it. Mm-hmm. It may not be scientifically accurate, but it will serve our purpose.
All right. Now, what do you suggest I write?
I have always championed the cause of the so-called psycho killer. That's right. Because...
Todd?
Hi.
Mrs. Hastings got an article in the campus news this morning. Look at the title. I conquered the compulsion killer.
Well, let me see that. Didn't look to me as if she did much conquering the other night.
Well, read it. It's terrific.
I have always championed the cause of the so-called psycho killer because I know that underneath all his seeming brutality, there is a frustrated, cowardly, fearful human being.
Boy, oh boy, Our Lady of Criminology sure laid on the line this morning, didn't she?
And how? These psychos are sick men and women. Their private hours are dogged by remorse and fear of punishment.
Oh, no. How about this? They droop with shame and humiliation.
They droop with shame and humiliation. They lack the ability to think clearly or with objectivity.
And I love this last line. The psycho killer is not to be feared, but to be pitied. After my experience last night, I could never be afraid again.
You know, I'd be more impressed if she admitted she was scared stiff. What's she trying to prove anyway?
Or maybe she thinks she'd do better if she had another chance.
Later in the day, before dark, Mrs. Hastings started for the library alone. Or so it seemed. Lieutenant Weston made sure help was no longer than a few seconds away.
I talked to Todd Leslie. As soon as it gets dark, the leaders of the students' group are going to meet at Marzel's boarding house.
There was nothing unusual in this action on the part of Mrs. Hastings, and we felt sure it would arouse no suspicion on anyone's part.
Mrs. Hastings.
Hello, Cam.
Say, Mrs. Hastings, I wanted to ask you a few things. Do you really believe that stuff you wrote for the paper?
Why else would I write it?
Well, maybe you tried to smoke out the killer.
I would like to talk to him. I'd like to let him know he has at least one friend.
If I were the killer, Mrs. Hastings, I wouldn't consider you a friend.
Are you the killer, Cam?
Well, of course not. You don't see me drooping with shame and humiliation, do you? Mrs. Hastings, you better get home before it gets dark. The only thing you're going to do if you run into the killer is prove your husband is right.
Thank you.
Now, Lieutenant, I've picked out 10 members of the football team, and we've set up stations all along the campus.
Lieutenant, I want to join this patrol, but Todd doesn't think I should.
Neither do I.
Well, look, I can handle myself very well, Lieutenant, probably better than most men. And there's another thing.
What?
One of the victims of this madman was my best friend.
I'm sorry, I understand how you feel. As a matter of fact, there's not going to be any campus patrol tonight.
What? But the guys are all ready, just waiting for word from you.
Send them home. Tell them the proposition is canceled.
Now, wait a minute, Lieutenant.
You wait a minute, all of you. I'm sick and tired of a lot of civilians trying to tell me how to run my business.
But you said...
Never mind what I said. 10 members of a football team sneaking around the campus waiting for a killer to show up. I say it's stupid. This man has killed 4 people. Nobody's ever seen what he looks like. You think he's dumb enough not to know the football team is out there trying to stop him?
Well, what are you going to do now?
Send the football team home. Then go home yourselves, all of you. Let the police department take over. Do you mind?
No, I don't mind, but Mrs. Hastings is over there in the library. Who's going to protect her on her way home?
I don't think she needs protection. I think we have the killer under lock and key, and that's my attitude until somebody else proves otherwise.
For instance, until Mrs. Hastings or some other woman is killed.
Young man, all you've got to do is do as you're told. We're going to be watching the Hastings house, and we're going to be watching the street out there.
Listen, there are long stretches on this campus, especially between the library and the street. Now, who's going to watch those?
How many times do I have to say it? This is police business, not student business. Nothing's going to happen to Mrs. Hastings on the campus, because we're going to be on the job out there.
Lieutenant, I think you're making a big mistake.
Counselor, I think you're interfering in something that doesn't concern you. Now, the meeting's adjourned. Break it up. Go home, all of you.
Come on, Cam. Good night, Lieutenant. Have fun.
Brother, I don't get this at all.
Hey, wait a minute, Cam. I'm going with you. You know, I live here, but I don't like the present company.
Todd Lester. This I didn't expect.
I guess nobody did. You know what? I'm glad it's all over. They used to tell my mother I'd kill somebody someday. But she just laughed at them. Well, I did kill somebody. And if I ever get the chance, I'll probably kill somebody else. She said I droop with shame and humiliation. She shouldn't have put that in the paper. You hear, Mrs. Hastings? You shouldn't have... It wasn't Mrs. Hastings.
This is Sergeant Mulligan of the police department. She took Nancy's place for the occasion.
Quite an occasion, isn't it?
Well, then take him to the car. Fine work, Sergeant Mulligan.
Any time for you, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
That was quite a show you put on for the students over at the boarding house. Have you ever considered acting as a hobby, Lieutenant?
I was considering it as a profession. And I was thinking of making police work my hobby.
Well, as the sergeant said, any time for you, Lieutenant.
Darling, it's wonderful. It's so wonderful to have you back home again.
You see, Nance, even I wouldn't walk across campus by myself at night.